We're letting AI into almost every corner of our lives, right? From how we manage our money to how doctors make diagnoses. But with all that power, there's this huge, looming question we absolutely have to answer.
And I mean, how do we really trust it? Not just hope for the best, but actually trust it with the big stuff. It's not just a gut feeling. It's about building these systems with qualities that we can actually measure, test, and prove.
So, to figure this out, we're not just going to guess. We're looking at the playbook written by the experts, the AI Risk Management Framework from NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology. Think of it as the technical blueprint for what trustworthy AI should look like.
Right, so what exactly are the ingredients that make an AI trustworthy, according to NIST? Well, it turns out it's not just one thing. It's actually a whole set of characteristics that have to be carefully balanced against each other.
Let's think about it like we're building a house. You can't just throw up the roof and walls and hope for the best, right? You need a rock-solid foundation first. We're going to build this idea of trustworthy AI from the ground up, piece by piece, exactly how NIST lays it out.
First things first. Every single trustworthy system has to start with a foundation that is completely non-negotiable. Because if you get this part wrong, everything else we talk about just falls apart. And for AI, that foundation is being valid and reliable.
So what does that actually mean? It means the AI has to do the job it was built for. And it has to do it correctly and consistently, not just in some perfect lab setting, but out here, in the messy, unpredictable real world. If it can't do that, none of the other fancy features matter one bit.
Okay, so our foundation is poured and set. Now we can start putting up the pillars that will actually support the rest of the structure. These are the things that give trustworthy AI its real strength and shape.
First up, the system has to be safe. Now, this one sounds obvious, but it is absolutely critical. It just means the AI can't cause harm to people, property, or the environment. It's all about making sure that even if the system fails, it fails in a safe way.
Building on that, the system also has to be secure and resilient. Now, these are two sides of the same coin. Security is about defending against someone trying to attack the system. Resilience, on the other hand, is about how quickly it can bounce back after something goes wrong, whether that's an attack or just a random glitch.
Next is a huge one, making the AI explainable and interpretable. This is all about cracking open that infamous black box. Explainability gives you the technical breakdown of how the AI got to an answer. But interpretability is arguably even more important. It tells you why it made that decision and what that decision actually means to us humans.
And then we have privacy. The system has to be privacy enhanced. And look, this goes way beyond just not leaking data. It's about protecting human dignity and autonomy. It means you build the AI from the very beginning to respect personal privacy, using special tech to keep data exposure to a bare minimum.
And the final pillar in this group is that the AI has to be fair. This means you are actively identifying and trying to fix harmful biases. So the system doesn't just copy or, even worse, amplify the inequalities that already exist in our society. This one is a massive challenge, and we're definitely going to circle back to it.
So we've got our foundation, and we've got these strong pillars. But there's one more piece to our structure, something that doesn't just sit in one place, but runs through everything, holding it all together.
That piece is accountability and transparency. This is the connective tissue for everything else. I mean, think about it. How can you have a fair system if you're not transparent about the data it was trained on? How can you have a safe system if no one is accountable when it fails? This is the core principle that lets us understand, check, and ultimately assign responsibility for what an AI does. Okay, so we've built this beautiful model of trustworthy AI. Everything has its place. It sounds great, right? Well, here's the catch. This is the real-world challenge of AI ethics today. You can't just turn all of these dials up to max. Sometimes they're fighting against each other.
And that's the whole ballgame. We have to make tough choices. It's like a big sound mixing board. If you push the slider for one characteristic like privacy all the way up, it might pull the slider for another one, like fairness, down. These are what we call socio-technical trade-offs, and figuring them out is the really hard part.
Let me give you a really concrete, technical example of this. Let's say your goal is to make your system super private. You might use a technique called differential privacy, which adds a little bit of statistical noise to the data so you can't identify any one person. Sounds great, but what if you have very little data for a certain group of people? That's called data sparsity. Well, in that case, adding that noise can seriously mess up the model's accuracy specifically for that group. So,
Boom. In trying to do the right thing for privacy, you've accidentally made the system less fair.
And this isn't just my theory. NIST says this explicitly in their own documents. This is a known mathematical reality. It forces you to ask a really tough question. How much fairness are you willing to trade for a little more privacy? There's no easy answer.
That whole fairness thing is so critical and so thorny that we really need to dig into its biggest enemy, bias. Because you can't even begin to fix bias if you don't understand all the different ways it can sneak into your system.
NIST breaks bias down into 3 main buckets, and it's so important to realize that it's not just about biased data. The problem is much deeper and can come from our society, from the math itself, and even from our own brains. First, you've got systemic bias. This is the bias that's already out there in the world, baked into our history and our institutions. The AI doesn't invent this bias. It just acts like a mirror, learning and reflecting the biases present in the data we feed it. Then there's computational and statistical bias. This is when the problem is actually in the technology or the math. Maybe your data sample isn't representative of the real world, or maybe the algorithm you chose has some inherent flaw. This isn't about society. This is an engineering error. So, when you put all of this together, what do you get? Well, it becomes pretty clear that building AI you can trust isn't like following a recipe. It's a constant balancing act, navigating these trade-offs and trying to understand really deep problems like bias.
And that brings us to the final and maybe most important question of all. If we know that these trade-offs are going to happen, that we might have to choose between a little more privacy or a little more fairness, who gets to make that decision? Who decides which value wins? That's not a question for an algorithm to answer. That is a deeply human question, and it's one we all need to start thinking about right now.